Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Mantra Monday. Now, last week we were talking about sadness. But there are levels that go much deeper than mere sadness. There is the idea of grief. Grief is a terrible thing. The pain of loss is profound, and it takes a lot of time to work through. And some people find that they are unable to work their way through it and are perpetually stuck in a part of that grief. It never leaves them, like a malaise. And when we're talking about grief, usually what we're talking about the loss of a person that we held very dear. Now, of course, in our beliefs, we realize that that person has not actually disappeared. They have simply transitioned from one state of being to another. They have dropped their physical form, but their eternal self continues. And for some people, that is something that allows them to deal with their grief more easily. But it doesn't change the fact that you cannot be with them in the same way. You cannot talk to them in the same way. You don't interact. They have disappeared from your third dimension ability to be with, and that is very painful. Sometimes you can see this coming when you know that there's someone who is progressing towards their transition, and you can work through some of this grief. But there is still that point of time which you have to deal with that feeling. A feeling of pain, a feeling of emptiness. It is difficult to describe, and it is difficult to move through. And that can be for more than just a person. We are very attached to our pets. Another thing that we are attached to is the way we move through life. When somebody has been in particularly good circumstances in their life and something happens that turns everything upside down, this is a problem for them. Especially if there's a loss of money or status. The way that they are used to moving through the world has fundamentally changed. And that is extremely difficult for a lot of people to deal with, because there is a confidence that they had previously because they were comfortable in their situation that they no longer have to fall back on. And that is very upsetting and disruptive. And there is grief that comes with that as well. Because everything that they thought about themselves, which unfortunately we often get caught up in defining ourselves by what we do, how much money we make, who do we interact with, all that gets stripped away, and we are forced to reevaluate who we actually are, who we are fundamentally, without all those other trappings that we defined ourselves with. That we are not our job, and we are not our spouse, we are not our family, we are not the house we live in, or the car we drive, or the people we interact with, or the places we go. We have to reevaluate who we are. And that can be something that is very upsetting. And we grieve for who we used to be. Um, this happens frequently with people who become chronically ill. There was a way that they defined themselves before the illness came, and how they have to define themselves after the illness. And they have to grieve for the person that they used to be, that person who will never be again, and come to terms with who they are now. So grief comes in many forms, and it is some of the most painful things one has to deal with. I have a great deal of sympathy for people who are going through the grief process. The problem that we have often is that we see someone going through the grief process and we mistakenly assume that there is an expiration date for that, and there isn't. Something that you might be able to work through in a year, that other person, it may be several years, if at all. And at a certain point, many of us lose our empathy for somebody who's going through that long-term grief process, because we assume that by now they should be better. That's not how it works. Grief does not have a timeline. It takes as long as it takes. So, what can we do? Is there anything we can do to help ourselves work through that grief process more, I don't want to say efficiently. There's nothing efficient about working through the grief process. There are good days and there are bad days. You move forward and you think you're moving through it, and then something happens that triggers that grief all over again, and you feel like you've stepped back to the very day the change happened. So I don't want to put any unrealistic expectations, but I will say that perhaps giving a mantra to allow you to focus, to keep yourself from spiraling, to let that grief become seated within you in a way that is less destructive. Because you know that a certain piece of that grief will always be with you. It's just a matter of, are you going to get stuck in that grief, or are you going to be able to move forward in spite of that grief? And that's what this mantra is working towards now. To be able to process that grief, to put it back into that little spot where you know where it is, but that it no longer is a primary motivating force in your life. It's not the first thing you think of when you wake up, or the last thing you think of before you go to sleep. You know it's there, but it doesn't have the same hold on your day-to-day existence. So that's what we're going to be working towards today. And that particular mantra is Shante Prashante Sarva Shoka Pashamani Swaha. Let's do a few Ganesh. Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha, 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 Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha. Okay. So let's do our mantra for today. As I said, it's Shanti Prashanti Sarva Shulka Upashamani Swaha. Alright? Shanti Prashanti Sarva Shulka Upashamani Swaha. 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 I have some friends who are right now currently going through the most current and active part of grief, having lost loved ones in the very recent past. I grieve with them. I hope that if you have people in your life who are going through the grief process, that you can provide them support as they work through this difficult time. Know that this will be an ongoing issue for them, probably for the rest of their days. If that process seems to be taking longer than you expect and you find yourself being uncomfortable in their presence, then I would suggest that you support them from perhaps a little more distance. Let them know that you still support them, but that you need to step back. Because the last thing they need is somebody judging them because they're not getting over it quickly enough. That is not for you to choose. I wish everyone well. I will see you all next week.